series for LeBron. For more on that and all things NBA, let's welcome back our panelists, Adrian Wojnarowski from Yahoo Sports, Scoop Jackson, ESPN.com, Page 2 columnist, and Vincent Thomas, columnist for Slam Magazine. And Scoop, let me begin with you. LeBron, it seems like the Celtics have figured out the formula to shut him down. Can he bounce back and get this team to the finals?
Yeah, I think so. Well, let's take one series at a time. I think he can get back in this series for a couple of reasons. One, you know, he kind of did the same thing last year against Detroit in the conference finals where he had 2 bad games, didn't even take a shot to get into game 1 and had everybody talking about his heart. And he bounced back in that series and just played phenomenal basketball. But then secondly, we have to understand how to how the Boston Celtics are playing on the road so far in the playoffs this year. If we're judging by what they did against Atlanta and how they're going to do in this series, then I think Cleveland has a shot to get back into it. And plus, give him 3 things, is that, you know, can he find a rhythm? San Antonio did not let LeBron find a rhythm defensively, so it's just a matter of can Mike Brown look at what San Antonio did and apply it to get by what Boston's doing to him, which seems to be the same thing.
Vincent, you think LeBron can get this thing back on track?
Well, I definitely think that he can. I don't know if I necessarily think that he will because, you know, on Doc Rivers' side, he has a defensive coordinator, so to speak, like how they have in the NFL with Tom Thibodeau. What I don't think Mike Brown has is an offensive coordinator. And, you know, as has been said before, LeBron isn't getting the ball in the right spots. There's not a lot of motion with the Cleveland offense. It's very stagnant. And when you're playing against a defense like Boston, you need strategy. And unless Cleveland is going to come up with some new strategy in these next, you know, 4 or 5 games, we might see, you know, maybe LeBron's worst series in the playoffs.
Adrian, the Celtics seem to be unstoppable at home. They're looking good right now in this series, and the big 3 have come back to life. Is it a season of destiny for the Celtics?
You know, I mean, I'm not sure it's a season of destiny. I mean, listen, this is a group that individually, you know, except for James Posey and Sam Cassell, these are guys who have not won big in the postseason. And I think that was part of the reason you saw them struggle a little bit against Atlanta in the opening round, because they have not been through anything like this together. You know, I do think that the one thing Atlanta had going for it that the Cavs don't is Atlanta ran the Celtics, and they ran them into the ground. Got up and down, and just the Celtics were gassed. And that the first time all year they looked old in those road games in Atlanta. But Cleveland's not going to do that to them on the road, and I think that's a reason Boston's defense may travel a little better to Cleveland than it did to Atlanta.
Vincent, a lot of talk about East versus West. Can the Celtics hold up, do you think?
You mean in the finals?
Yes, if they make it that far.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, they had some problems against Atlanta, but we saw what they did, you know, late in the season when they went through Texas and swept all 3 teams. So when Boston is playing Boston ball, they can beat anybody. And although, you know, like Adrian said, Cassell and Posey may be the only guys there with rings, they have some significant, you know, veteran superstars on that squad that, you know, when on, you know, that stage, the final stage, they'll be able to perform. So I think that they can definitely compete against the Western teams.
Kobe Bryant, obviously an MVP year, nice playoff run. Not the same Kobe a year ago. Let's listen to Kobe dissing last year.
Is there anything that the Los Angeles Lakers could do to make you change your mind and decide that you do not want to be traded?
No.
Nothing.
No. It's rough, man, but you know, I just don't see how you can rebuild that trust. Yeah, I would like to be traded, and as tough as it is to say that, you know, there's no other alternative.
And that was Kobe Bryant with Stephen A. Smith. And here's a column from Ian O'Connor. Part of it, he says, in a perfect world, a world where selfish conduct isn't rewarded with a FedEx shipment in the form of Pau Gasol, Bryant would be joining the Nets and Knicks at the draft lottery and watching David Stern's postseason ban play on without him. Scoop, is this a new, more mature Kobe Bryant, or are we still hiding the self-serving star?
No, I don't think we're hiding it. I think he should have got General Manager of the Year and along with the MVP because he forced the Lakers to make the moves that they did. If he hadn't come out publicly and put the Lakers on blast like this, Derek Fisher's not there, and they don't make the real serious move to get Pau Gasol in their uniform. So I think he's matured, and I think part of Derek Fisher being there took a lot of pressure off of Kobe. But also he's matured because everybody else around him has gotten better. And, you know, winning is the best deodorant in sports, man. So it's all smelling lovely now.
Hey, Adrian, what do you think about that?
I mean, Mitch Kupchak's the executive of the year in the league. Listen, Mitch Kupchak is the young players that Kobe hated last year that now he's a great teammate with. They were there already. And listen, they didn't just start trying to make moves because Kobe started yelling and screaming last summer and demanding a trade. I mean, the Paul Gasol deal was a gift, and you know we can talk all day about why Memphis just gave him away as they did, but Kobe had nothing to do with that. I mean, he and now you even hear Kobe trying to take credit for Andrew Bynum and his development, that he lit a fire under him. Andrew Bynum played pretty well early last year. He's gotten older, more mature. Things have matured around him. Listen, Kobe's Kobe, and he's a great player. But I think a lot of this was in spite of Kobe, not because of him.
See, I'm going to disagree, but I think, you know, you look at the Smush Parker and Kwame Brown being on that squad this year, and I think that makes a world of difference. And I think not Kobe made Andrew Bynum better. I think Derek Fisher being there is part of the reason Andrew Bynum had the season he had up until getting there. And I'm not disagreeing with you saying, but I'm just saying I don't know if the Lakers go out and as aggressive as they were. Even though the Paul Gasol thing was a gift, I don't even know if they do that without Kobe making, you know, publicly trying to embarrass him.
And let me bring you in here.
If I can piggyback on what Scoop said, I think that Kobe Bryant did light a fire under his teammates because athletes are egotistical and they're driven by their ego and by like machismo. So when you have Kobe basically denigrating his teammates, there's no way that couldn't have spurred them to perhaps show and prove, you know, in spite of what he said. Now, I don't necessarily know if Kobe is no longer selfish, but I know that he has matured because the way that he dealt with things in the offseason was childish and it was juvenile, and I think that you can see a different way that he behaves with his teammates these days, but it's all predicated on success. I never think Kobe was selfish. I just always thought he was driven. He wanted to win, and he's winning now, so of course his attitude is going to change.
I mean, Adrian, let me bring you in on another topic. We've got a sort of a new era developing, bright new young stars, Chris Paul and Dwight Howard, et cetera, et cetera. Is this a new age of prosperity for the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul and Dwight Howard these guys are from central casting for the NBA. I mean, certainly we know what kind of great players they are. These are great people, you know, really good young role models for the league. There's no question. I was talking to Chris Paul's brother, CJ Paul, who's his business manager, last week about this, and I really think Chris Paul, and I think Dwight to an extent too, Chris is going to be able to become what Grant Hill in the endorsement world never really was able to because of the injuries. I mean, Chris Paul is different than a lot of stars in the league, and I think he'll be marketed very differently, but what he's done on the floor in these playoffs, he's playing the point guard position as well as any 22, now 23-year-old guard has in this league since Magic Johnson.
Scoop, on a different topic, what do you make of the failed trades involving Shaq and Jason Kidd? What's the fallout from that?
Well, I don't know. I think you look at it because there were such big moves, but I think they're two different situations. I think the Jason Kidd situation can be looked at, you know, a little differently than the Shaq situation. The question you have to ask yourself is, does Dallas get past, you know, the New Orleans Hornets, even if they do not make that trade? And I think everybody looking at New Orleans right now may say, no, they still wouldn't have gotten out in the first round, even though they may not have been the 7th seed. But in, you know, Sun's situation with Shaquille O'Neal, you know, there was always that threat of Shawn Marion not being there. And I think Steve Kerr had to make a decision on, do I let this player go now and get something in return for him if I don't do that, or do I just let, you know, Shawn Marion waste away here and never get anything, and people will get on me before I had the opportunity to have Shaq? So I think there's two different scenarios. Did they work out? I don't know if the trades are the reason they didn't get past the first round. I believe that they ran up against two teams that just happened to be better than them in the first round, and the West was that tight that there was no way for them to avoid it.
But George, I would say that this is a cautionary tale against perhaps mortgaging your future for aging stars. I agree with the trades at the time that they were made, but you know it should always be looked at when you bring in players as old as Shaq and Jason Kidd are at their stages of their career.
The Dallas trade is going to haunt the Mavericks much longer. Phoenix will be able to rebound and start to rebuild their team, but the 2 first-round picks that Dallas gave up and Devin Harris, who's going to be a very good point guard in this league for the next 10 years, the Mavericks are going to pay a much bigger price for a Jason Kidd who's on a decline right now.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. Adrian, Scoop, Vincent, thank you all for a lively discussion.
No problem, George.
No problem.
And
Thanks, George.
coming up, we'll tell you who's investigating